Welcome to Cheater Confessions. Let's get started with today's story. It all began on a Friday evening. Stephanie, my wife of 8 years, and I were invited to her best friend Alice's birthday party. Alice and Stephanie had been close since college, and we'd attended dozens of parties at Alice's house over the years. This one felt no different. As we got ready, Stephanie looked stunning in her blue dress. It hugged her figure just right, and her hair was perfectly styled. "How do I look?" she asked. "Beautiful as always," I said, smiling. "You'll probably steal the spotlight from Alice." She laughed. "Don't be silly. Tonight's about her." We arrived at Alice's house around 8 p.m. The place was packed with people, some familiar, some not. Alice greeted us at the door with a drink in her hand. "Ben, Stephanie, so glad you made it," she said, hugging Stephanie tightly. The party was lively, with music blasting and laughter echoing through the rooms. Stephanie and I stuck together for a while, mingling with a few friends. We even had a few drinks, just enough to loosen up. That's when I noticed him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and had this smug smile plastered on his face. He stood across the room, holding a whiskey glass, and his eyes were fixed on Stephanie. I don't know if it was the alcohol or my gut instincts, but something about the way he looked at her made me uncomfortable. "Who's that guy?" I asked, nudging Stephanie. She followed my gaze. "Oh, that's just Ryan. He's a friend of Alice's," she said casually. "I think I met him at her housewarming last year." Ryan raised his glass slightly in our direction. Stephanie smiled politely back, then turned her attention to me. "Don't be weird, Ben," she said, chuckling. "He's harmless." "Harmless?" I muttered under my breath. "Yeah, sure." I tried to shake off the feeling, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. Stephanie wasn't giving him much attention, so I let it go. She mingled with a few other friends, laughing and chatting. I stayed close for a while, but eventually, I lost sight of her in the crowd. Not wanting to overthink it, I scanned the room quickly, but still didn't see her. I decided to ask Alice. She was busy chatting with a group of guests near the dining area. "Hey, Alice," I said, trying to sound casual. "Have you seen Stephanie?" Alice thought for a moment. "Last I saw, she was heading to the kitchen. She should be there." "Thanks," I said, heading toward the kitchen. As I turned the corner, I stopped in my tracks. There she was, Stephanie, standing by the counter with Ryan. They were talking, their heads close together, and Ryan was leaning in just a little too much. Stephanie was laughing at something he said, her drink in one hand and the other lightly touching her necklace. I clenched my fists and walked straight toward them. "Stephanie," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. Both of them turned to look at me. "Hey, Ben," Stephanie said, her smile faltering slightly. "What's up?" "Mind if I interrupt?" I said, glaring at Ryan. Ryan raised his hands defensively. "No problem, man, we were just chatting." I ignored him and looked at Stephanie. "Can we talk?" She hesitated but nodded. "Sure." She set her drink down, and we walked back to the living room. The music and chatter surrounded us, but my focus was entirely on her. "What were you doing in there with him?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "We were just talking," she said, frowning. "What's the big deal?" "The big deal?" I said, trying to stay calm. "He was all over you. The way he was leaning in. Come on, Stephanie. It didn't look like just talking." She crossed her arms. "You're overreacting, Ben. I told you, he's a friend of Alice's. We were just making conversation." I shook my head, frustrated. "I don't like the way he looks at you. It's disrespectful. To me and to our marriage." Stephanie sighed, her expression softening. "I'm sorry if it bothered you, but I promise there's nothing going on. Can we just relax and enjoy the party?" I wanted to push further, but the look in her eyes made me back down, for the moment. "Fine," I said, "but stay away from him." She nodded. "Okay." We went back to mingling, but the unease in my chest lingered. I tried to focus on other conversations and even managed to laugh at a few jokes. For a while, things seemed normal again. About an hour later, I was deep in conversation with a colleague who happened to be at the party. Stephanie excused herself to get another drink. Time passed, and I realized she hadn't come back. I scanned the room but didn't see her. I wandered into the kitchen thinking she might have been chatting with Alice. No luck. Then I checked the patio, the dining room, even the small den where a few people were playing cards. Still no sign of Stephanie. A strange unease settled over me. I started walking down the hallway toward the bedrooms. The sound of muffled voices and laughter faded as I moved farther from the crowd. All the doors were closed, and the hallway was eerily quiet. I stopped at the first door, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. No sound. No movement. I moved to the next door. The same. Each time I strained to hear something, anything, but the rooms were silent. On my way to the last door, I passed the bathroom. I paused. Faint voices drifted through the thick wooden door. My pulse quickened as I pressed closer, trying to make out the words. It was a woman speaking and laughing, but after a few seconds I realized it wasn't Stephanie's voice. Relieved but still uneasy, I moved on to the last door. I stood there, my heart hammering in my chest. At first there was only silence. Then I heard it. Stephanie's laughter, soft and unmistakable. My stomach turned. And then the laughter stopped, replaced by something else. Soft murmurs, followed by the unmistakable sound of moans. I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. My hand hovered over the doorknob, trembling as a storm of rage and heartbreak surged through me. I took a deep breath, then opened the door, and my world came crashing down. There she was, my wife, lying on the bed, tangled in the sheets with Ryan. Her dress was off and his shirt was unbuttoned. They didn't even notice me at first. I stood there frozen, unable to believe what I was seeing. "Stephanie?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Her head snapped toward me and her eyes widened in shock. "Ben, oh my God, this isn't—" "Save it," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I saw enough." Ryan, looking completely unfazed, leaned back against the headboard. "Hey man, relax. It's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Not what it looks like? Really? That's the best you've got?" Stephanie scrambled to cover herself with the sheet, tears streaming down her face. "Ben, please, let me explain." I shook my head and stormed out of the room. My chest felt like it was about to explode. How could she do this to me? To us? She followed me down the hallway, barefoot and disheveled. "Ben, please stop. I made a mistake. It was the alcohol. I wasn't thinking." "Oh, so now it's the alcohol's fault?" I said, spinning around to face her. "You were thinking just fine when you smiled at him across the room. Don't act like this just happened." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I love you, Ben." "Love me?" I shouted. "You don't betray someone you love, Stephanie. You don't humiliate them like this." The partygoers were starting to notice the commotion. Alice approached us, looking concerned. "What's going on?" "Ask your friend," I said coldly. "She's got plenty to explain." Stephanie buried her face in her hands, sobbing. Alice looked from me to Stephanie, then back to me. "Ben, let's talk privately," she said, trying to diffuse the situation. "I'm done talking," I said, grabbing my coat. "Enjoy the rest of your party." I walked out and got into my car, hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I drove aimlessly for hours, trying to process what had just happened. Images of Stephanie and Ryan flashed in my mind, each one cutting deeper than the last. The guilt, the anger, and the pain were all mixing together in a storm of emotions I couldn't control. I knew I needed to figure things out, but I didn't have the answers. I didn't want to go home, not after what had just happened. I couldn't face her, not yet. So I drove for what felt like forever, trying to escape the thoughts in my head. My phone buzzed and I glanced at the screen. It was Stephanie. I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear anything from her. She called again, and then again. Seeing her name on the screen only made my stomach twist more. I couldn't talk to her, not like this. I ended up at Damien's house. He was one of the few people I knew I could turn to when everything fell apart. I knocked on his door at nearly 2 a.m. "Ben? What the hell?" "It's late," Damien said, his voice groggy as he opened the door. "I'm sorry for being here so late, man, but it's an emergency," I told him, my voice unsteady. I had no idea how to explain this, but I knew I had to talk to someone. Damien stepped aside and let me in. We walked into the living room and I sat down on the couch, my hands still shaking. Damien sat across from me, looking at me with concern. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself before I spoke. "She cheated on me, Damien," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw her with him, Ryan. I saw them together, in a bedroom. They were… I couldn't finish the sentence. The image of them, so close, kept playing in my mind. Damien was quiet for a moment. His face showed shock, disbelief. No way, man. I can't believe it. I nodded. I saw them. I don't know what to do. I can't go back home. I can't even look at her right now. I'll just go to a hotel. I paused, feeling the weight of everything crushing me. I don't even know what's real anymore. Damien didn't say anything for a while, letting me calm down. Then he spoke. A hotel? Are you out of your mind? You can stay here tonight. You don't need to be alone right now. Are you sure? I asked, still trying to wrap my head around everything. Yeah, he replied firmly. You're not going anywhere. I nodded, grateful. Thanks, man. I sat back, running a hand through my hair, trying to collect my thoughts. But even as I tried to settle, my phone buzzed again. I pulled it out, and it was Stephanie calling again. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I watched as the call went to voicemail, and then immediately another call came in. Damien noticed. She's been calling since you left, huh? I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just watched the screen as the calls kept coming in. Each one felt like another reminder of the betrayal. Damien's voice broke through the silence. So, what do you think you're going to do now? I let out a long breath, my chest heavy. I'll file for a divorce, I said, finally making the decision. The words felt final, even though a part of me was still questioning everything. Damien nodded. I know a good lawyer. I can give you his number if you need it. Good. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it, I said, my voice low but sincere. The next morning I drove back to the house. I couldn't avoid it forever. I needed to grab a few things, mostly clothes, but I knew it wasn't going to be easy. When I walked through the front door, Stephanie was sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. She stood up when she saw me. Ben, we need to talk, she said, her voice shaky. I didn't answer right away. I just walked past her and headed upstairs to the bedroom. I grabbed a few shirts, some pants, and my jacket. I could feel her eyes on me, following me. I didn't mean for this to happen, Ben, she said, standing at the doorway. Please, we can work through this. You have to understand it was a mistake. I turned to face her, my hands gripping the clothes in my arms. A mistake? So this is how you see it, Stephanie? I asked, my voice low but firm. She looked away, unable to answer. I could see the guilt in her eyes, but it didn't change anything. I saw you with him, I said, my chest tightening as I recalled that moment. I can't get that image out of my head. I can't stay here. I'm filing for a divorce. Her face went pale. Ben, please, I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right. Just give me another chance. I shook my head, my heart heavy. No, it's too late. I grabbed the last of my things and walked out, not looking back. As I stepped into the car, I realized there was no turning back. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I couldn't live a lie anymore. The divorce was quick, no more than a few months. Stephanie tried to contact me a few more times, but I ignored her calls. I needed to move on. Damien helped me through the process, offering support whenever I needed it. In the end, things settled down. I focused on rebuilding my life, and though the pain didn't disappear completely, I learned to live with it. I didn't regret the decision to walk away. It wasn't easy, but it was the only way forward. Thank you for watching.